Well, I'll better remove the spring from this release lever at this stage so that I don't lose it or damage it in the cleaning process. And I've got the majority of my parts sorted out here now into what's going through the ultrasonic cleaner, what can't go through the ultrasonic cleaner, and then other various big pieces which are assemblies I haven't dealt with yet. Okay, the rewind button. That back catch release is very tight. I think I'll have to be into that. So I've got a pair of pliers here made for dealing with that button. And that was done simply by buying a nice cheap pair of pliers with nice soft steel, grinding them back down short, and then sticking in the vise and drilling a hole down in the centre of the jaws of the appropriate diameter. And hey presto, you've got a wonderful set of custom made pliers to do wonderful things. Here's the clutch assembly. I'll just pull that apart. Put the film sprocket to one side. They don't usually require any attention. Shutter release. I'll leave that in there for the second. Let's get the unhook the spring for the rewind button lock. That's the little catch that holds the rewind button in the up position until such stage as you move the film advance again, whereupon it unlocks it. I'm just looking for the screws that hold this film advance. Bush to the body. They're not loose, that's good. And possibly more importantly, they're not too tight, so I'm not having to fight with them. That is very sticky with dried out grease, so that'll certainly benefit from cleaning and relubrication. That's like glue, that stuff. So out with the take up spool. The metal bush I'll clean in the ultrasonic cleaner, plastic one I'll clean manually. Right, let's be into this. This shroud from the gear on this transfer shaft arrangement. Let's get that off. Here's the front half of that transfer shaft. It's got a slot down the middle, couples to the rear half which stays in the body. This front plate on the inner helical couples to an arm which comes all the way up to the top of the camera and couples to the rangefinder. So that's got to come off. Two small screws at the front. And at the top the screw is the guide post for the rangefinder. Let's get this out of here. There. So you can see how it's got this arm on. So it's got a hinge in it. That allows it to fold back out of the way when you want it to. Now here I want to mark the position of the outer helical, this bright brass piece, relative to the focus scale ring, the black piece, and the inner helical, the dark brass piece, relative to the outer helical, so that I know when I put this back it'll be back in the correct position. So I'm just getting this to the point where my inner and outer helical are level with each other, so that I've got a point of reference, and I'll scribe a couple of lines across here and one on the other side. By doing that I know how they align, and more importantly I know which way up they align. It's not hard with your focus scale ring, it's not easy with your inner and outer focus helical. But by having some convention It doesn't matter what it is, I just use 2 scratches at the base and 1 at the top. I know which way up that's going to go back in. Move those screws. 4 black screws here hold the bellows to the back of the front standard, so I'll slacken those off. And the bellows may or may not fall back into the body by themselves, not today. 4 nickel plated screws here, the ones with the rounded heads, hold this focus mount to the front standard. Lift that off entirely. I'll just part the bellows from the back of that front standard. It was just sort of stuck there with a glue of dirt and old grease. Let's take out our shutter release shaft. I've already reclaimed the spring from in here. Right, some screws here. Well, this one, little round head one here, that very short one, that holds the bracket that holds the transfer shaft in place. 2 screws here. They hold this outer shroud, this black part, into the camera. Just remove that screw that's stopping this from sitting flat on the bench. That's better. 2 screws do the same job at the base. And that screw was loose and its mate's no better. That's unusual. Alright, so this lot should come out of the housing. Oh, it's full of sand. It's been to the beach, probably on numerous occasions, and it's chocker with sand. That may explain why it's reluctant to move, reluctant to fold up. To remove this piece, this little section here, this couples the shutter release to this piece. And this does not want to move back inside. That should push back easily. It does not. That suggests that this housing is pushed in. Either that or there's some damage on the track. There's probably no point with fighting with that at the moment until I've had a chance to clean it, because as you can see, it's covered in dirty dried grease and grit. You know, I'll push that right the way through, release it, recover the springs from the buttons, and there are the buttons, top and bottom, and here we have the shutter release components, the return spring here, and this piece, which is quite stiff. It should rattle up and down when you do that. By itself it doesn't. It's sticky with grease. So that needs to be cleaned. Otherwise it simply won't return correctly to the up position when you take your finger off the shutter button. Alright, that's good. Now I've got to get this focus mount apart. I've got 4 more screws here. These small nickel plated countersunk or flathead screws. Everything here is glued together with old grease. That's quite stiff. Okay, so that's my parts ready to go and soak in the degreaser, and then probably get a burst in the ultrasonic cleaner and the degreaser. And all these parts have to be cleaned manually. This is absolutely chocker with filth. There's some terrible gunk down in here. It's no wonder things didn't want to slide easily. Alright, well that's enough for a day, I think. Just now that I've got the body empty, there's nothing in it. I noticed that the hinge is probably not as free as it should be. And I'm noticing there's some ice bumps on the back. And the leatherette is peeling at the edge of the body here. Look at that. That tells me the leatherette's going to have to come off. There'll be corrosion underneath them, particularly the ice bumps is a giveaway about corrosion, of course. Hey, what can I do? Let's find out. Some of this is lifting off very easily, almost certainly some of it will be stuck quite well. It's not always easy to get things to behave nicely. Now a little tiny patch there, so there's a hole here. There's a related lump on here. A tiny patch of leatherette stayed there. I'll see how I go. If I clean round that and glue that back in place, that'll probably be invisible. Otherwise I'll have to disguise that. This side will be the same. If the corrosion was a little bit more severe, this would be a very easy task to do. Oh, you can see there's ice bump under here. There's obviously a patch of something nasty right there. Because corrosion gets up under between the adhesive and the aluminium body and makes it let go. But when you've got a mixture of some parts that have got corrosion and some parts that do not, then it can be a bit more entertaining. There we go, that's off. And this corner was loose. You can see that's been loose for a while. This stuff here, that lump I said about, that's corrosion. Look at the state of that. All of that's got to come off. And the leatherette on the camera back. That's certainly loose there. But that's where it goes over the chromed brass hinge. Now this will be more entertaining. Anywhere you've got an edge like this, it's hard to get the leatherette to peel back from that point. It's always stuck better because the leatherette will have formed itself. It will have formed into a hard angle round there, and it doesn't want to fold back. Where it's flat, it's not so hard to deal with. A lot of ice bumps down this end. See if I can get under here. I can get up onto the flat of the door here, this will go quite smoothly, but getting underneath that edge is sometimes tricky. Okay, that's not too bad. This is quite brittle. It's not very flexible at all, which means that you can't just go levering it up. You can easily end up fracturing it. Some of these ice bumps will go once the leatherette's been cleaned and the body's been cleaned. Some of those will disappear. The leatherette will stick down and stay stuck down. Some of them, you know, that brittle leatherette, it's taken that shape. It's not flexible. Because it's not flexible, it's not going to want to come back. Yeah, it's stuck here and it's cracked, so I've got to work around that spot. If I can work back to this spot where it's stuck, I can see a crack across there. I'll see if I can work in from the other end. It's stuck quite well at this point. It really doesn't want to lift off. You can hear that crunchy sound. That's all the filthy corrosion and rubbish that I'm scraping the scalpel down beside. There you go, it's off. And you can see that big lump there and this big lump here. That's all corrosion product. That's all going to come off there. Here's the camera back. So look at this pattern here. That's probably the pattern of the adhesive. Looking at that, I wonder whether it was applied to the back of the leatherette with a stiff brush perhaps, so that it wasn't a dead smooth layer. But all of this stuff here, some of that's adhesive, some of it's corrosion and corrosion products, and all of this I really want it back. So I want to get this back to something like clean aluminium. Because we've got the best chance of getting a nice flat leatherette if I've got a nice flat camera to put it back onto. Right, that's enough for now.